Most visuals that the world is fed with about Africa by the international media are those of chaos, despondency, wars, famine, disease, drought, and other disasters. The natural, lush, beautiful, picturesque, and breathtaking scenes of peace and tranquility never seem to catch the lens of the international press. Welcome to Ghana, the capital of Pan-Africanism, the seat of ancient and sophisticated black kingdoms and civilization. The country which in no uncertain terms told its colonizers that it preferred freedom in danger to servitude in tranquility. The first black African country to attain independence and spearhead the decolonization process on the African continent. Ghana, which is approximately the size of Great Britain, is fast earning the accolade Gateway to Africa. The country whose motto is freedom and justice. Freedom and justice for all, regardless of race, creed, sex, social or ethnic origin. One of the numerous holiday resorts in the country, where visitors and citizens alike converge to relax and have a good time, is the La Beach Resort. This occasion, however, is different. It is special. Rita Marley is in town. Not only Rita Marley, but also hundreds of black brothers and sisters from the diaspora have arrived. All have returned to the motherland to take part in the first Emancipation Day celebration on the African continent. The day has its origins on the 1st of August, 1834, when the British government, by an act of parliament, abolished slavery and slave trading in all its colonies. Emancipation Day is commemorated principally in the Caribbean countries. During a state visit to the Caribbeans, President Rawlings took part in Emancipation Day celebrations in Jamaica. President Rawlings paid tribute to the memory of Marcus Garvey, a strong advocate for the repatriation to the motherland, and Paul Bogle, who was hanged for leading an uprising against slavery. Emancipation Day celebrates the abolition of chattel slavery, where one human being could be regarded as the property of another, and authoritatively marks the beginning of the struggle to regain total independence, affirmation of true identity, self-reliance, and the restoration of the dignity of the African race. This trip to Jamaica by President Rawlings culminated in the celebration of the event in Ghana. Kotoka International Airport, Accra. History is being made. Ghana awaits the return of the skeletal remains of two slave ancestors of Ghanaian origin from Jamaica and the United States of America. A high-powered government delegation, including Nana Odro Numapao, President of the National House of Chiefs, the Minister for Tourism, Honorable Mike Gizzo, his deputy, Honorable Orokwa Mofa, who is Chairman of the Emancipation Day Planning Committee, and Mr. Kobe Kumson, Ghana's ambassador to the U.S., are at the airport to welcome the remains and the accompanying delegations from Jamaica and the U.S. Leading the delegation from the U.S. is Mr. Sonny Carson. Minion Phillips, leader of the delegation, which brings home the remains from Jamaica. Mr. Carson is a direct descendant of one of the slave ancestors whose remains are today being brought from the United States for reinterment in Ghana. The two remains were identified as Ghanaians by experts from Jamaica and the United States. The bigger coffin contains the remains of John Carson, the ancestor from the U.S., while the smaller coffin contains the remains of Crystal from Jamaica. John Carson, who died at the age of 30 in 1845, was killed while fighting in the U.S. Navy in the war against Mexico. Crystal, a former house help from St. Anne in Jamaica, starved to death in 1670 at the age of 80. Her remains were among those of 4 individuals excavated by a team of anthropologists and archaeologists from the Syracuse University Maxwell School of Anthropology in association with the Jamaica National Heritage Trust. We give thanks and praises to the Almighty for your safe return. The first point of call is the Du Bois Memorial Center for Pan-Africanism.
Our souls would have shrunk and our spirits shriveled. Our manhood would have withered and our wombs warped if we had forgotten Africa. But we remembered always that homeland, considered often its simpler joys, and with unfettered hearts and unshackled minds, told our freedom in lullabies. And the words of our swollen lips and the meditations of our burdened hearts seemed acceptable in God's sight.
On this occasion of Emancipation Day, the Vice President, Professor John Atta Mills, on behalf of government and the people of Ghana, honors the memory of Dr. Nkrumah and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. Emancipation did not end with abolition of slavery. Great Pan-Africanists like Dr. Du Bois, Dr. Nkrumah, George Padmore, and Marcus Garvey sought to unite and uplift the dignity and the image of Africans the world over. Marcus Garvey's advocacy for repatriation to the motherland is today more relevant than ever before. And what better platform to re-echo it than on Emancipation Day?
We can now move forth into a Pan-African reality, but that reality must be based upon at least 3 sound fundamental principles. There must be an economic foundation to everything we do in terms of Pan-Africanism. We have to find a formula for unifying the richest continent in the world with the richest people in the diaspora, Africans by the hundreds of millions in South America, in the Caribbean, and in America, who have wealth, who have power, who have training, but who have to bring that forth to work for Mother Africa, laying the foundation for a world Pan-African Union.
Ghana saw the light years ago, during the days of President Nkrumah. Even today, we are still reaching out to our African brothers and sisters in the diaspora to come back home with their knowledge and resources to help develop the continent. In all his trips to cities of the world where Africans have been dispersed, President Rawlings has stated in unambiguous terms Ghana's stand on repatriation.
No African country has a moral right or should consider it ethical to shut the door to any black African in the diaspora.
But there's one truth that has to be told if repatriation is to be of benefit to the continent.
I am saying that without the skills and whatever little investment you can bring in, you will only be compounding the poverty of that continent. And this is why I think it's important that you equip yourself with the necessary skill than it is with technology.
President Rawlings's meeting with a cross-section of African Americans was a great experience.
President of Ghana, who I heard, nobody has to tell me he said it. I don't have to think it was a rumor. I've heard him say, African Americans, come home. He has made it clear.
Ghana continues to reach out to and embrace Africans in the diaspora. We urge them not to forget their roots. Though our history might be a sad one, we should never forget the past. So on this occasion of Emancipation Day, we remember the brutalities, torture, inhumanity, and pain that our ancestors went through on the long and arduous journey to the so-called New World. Such reminders, no doubt, will reawaken our consciousness and make us rededicate ourselves never to accept slavery in any form or guise, and sustain our struggle for total freedom and independence. Some people have asked, why bring the remains of people who died over 100 years ago for reinterment? For many Africans, especially those in the diaspora, this is a reverential homecoming. A homecoming which is both symbolic and tangible. An event which will create a realistic bridge for brothers and sisters in the diaspora to reconnect with the homeland. Ghana mourns her two ancestors. We mourn all who were torn away from their loved ones, all who were taken away against their wish into slavery. Years of shackles, 400 years of the slave master's whip, 400 years of toiling in the plantations and building the cities and industries of the slave masters. Today, the descendants of the enslaved demand recognition.
Reparations needs to be sung. The gong gong needs to be beaten all around the world. For those of us who are African descendants, we are owed a price for the mothers who had to stay in those slave dungeons 3 months, who had to go into the chambers with the governors, who had to sleep with them, who had to be on the plantations and be raped to create another race or a heightened race of people. We are owed our due. We never received our 40 acres and a mule. They haven't even apologized.
Kromantse Abanze are twin fishing villages, important historical trading centers to which the late Louis Armstrong, the great jazz player, traced his ancestry. Fort Amsterdam, also known as Fort Abanze, overlooks Kromantse and Abanze. This was one of the trading stations of the Dutch and the English. The people of Kromantse Abanze are mourning. They mourn, yet they are in high spirits. They await the arrival of the remains of the two ancestors. The Asafo warriors carry aloft the remains of two of their own. What else are they but warriors? Even in a strange land, the irrepressible, defiant, and resistant spirit of the Asafo warriors was manifest in the uprising and struggles of the enslaved for freedom. The symbolic return to the castle is about to begin aboard dugout canoes. Today, the ancestors will return to the Cape Coast Castle, that dreadful dungeon of anguish and pain, of darkness and lost hope. Today, those dreadful doors of no return will be opened wide to a royal welcome for Crystal and John Carson.
I am a warrior, and I'm not supposed to cry. But I'm so moved that every once in a while I got to walk off to my side because I never thought it would become like this. I'm so proud of being an African and being here that I can't even describe it. I am really, really overwhelmed.
Cape Coast, traditionally known as Ogwa, was one of the earliest towns along the coast to receive European adventurers and traders. Before 1877, it served as the capital of the then Gold Coast, but then lost its position to Accra. Today, as the capital of the central region, Cape Coast still abounds in buildings and structures left over by the colonial legacy. The most famous of these is the Cape Coast Castle. The Cape Coast Castle started as a lodge put up by the Portuguese about 200 yards from the coast. It was meant to facilitate the Portuguese trading activities with the people along the coast. As trading activities increased, it was expanded. The castle has been described as a concentration camp where captured Africans were kept, awaiting the arrival of the death ships for the journey to the unknown. The castle offers concrete testimony to the drama of human history and stands as witness to the slave trade. A very significant and symbolic part of the castle is the door of no return. It was the final exit for the captives who were then sent to the awaiting ships. It marked the transition from captivity to enslavement, the last point of contact with the motherland. Today, the remains of Crystal and John Carson will be returned to the castle through this very door. What is the significance of this?
One of the reasons we want to bring the body back through the door of no return, so that we can destroy forever the myth of a door of no return. Now we know the door of return, that there is no longer a door of no return. It has been destroyed. Now there's a door of return for all Africans to return home. Those bones from Jamaica and from the United States represent all of the millions, the hundreds of millions of Africans killed in the slave trade. Now that they have come back home, the spirits and the soul of the hundreds of millions have come. Now their children will be able to return. The myth of the door of no return has been destroyed. There's only now a door of return, and Ghana is the gateway to Africa, representing that door.
This is the high point of the Emancipation Day celebrations. the climax. All are anxiously awaiting the arrival of the remains to make the triumphant return through that door of lost hope, now the door of return. The significance of this ceremony cannot be underestimated. It is the one dream that the millions of our brothers and sisters who were forcefully taken away from our shores prayed and hoped for. They prayed for the day. They dreamt about it. They sang about it in their Negro spirituals. The day when the sweet chariots will come and take them back home. Home to the dear ones whom they were torn away from. Alas, it did not happen. They died with unfulfilled dreams of returning to the motherland. They died with broken hearts. But today, the children of their children's children, their descendants, quench that thirst, that desire for a reunion with the motherland. For those of us you left behind, this ceremony signifies our atonement for the abuse and your loss. It is an atonement for whatever role some of us might have played, directly or indirectly, in aiding and abetting this heinous crime. And for the brothers and sisters in the diaspora, it is a platform to recognize, acknowledge, and return to their roots. The myth of the door of no return has been broken. Now there is a door of return.
It was a great victory to the spirit of our ancestors. That was the most important part. I think they have never get their rights, and it is good that their children in this time find to honor them and respect them and give them their full rights. And that was one of the totality of knowing that the victory has come, that even the bones reach back here to lay in its homeland. And that was a great spiritual and physical upliftment for the nation of black people throughout the world.
So we dance with joy. We dance and trample upon the very floor where we were once oppressed and subjected to all kinds of inhumanity. We dance in a circle because we have now come full circle, and from now on we resolve to let that circle remain unbroken. Never again will we allow ourselves to be enslaved, either physically or mentally. And in all things, we give thanks and praises to the Almighty.
Claim victory over all evil adversary thought that this day would never come, that the children that had taken a journey would not return home. But we have returned home, and we are one family, one people, and one African family. And we proclaim our freedom this day, never to be enslaved again, never to be colonized again, never to be oppressed again, but we stand here to proclaim the indomitable spirit of the African. And we speak for generations of Africans who cried, who screamed, who lived, who died, who suffered. Most of all, we realize it was upon their shoulders and their experience that we here today testify of their victory and their strength.
We are now on the last lap of this spiritual journey. The destination is ASSIN MANSO. This will be the final resting place of the remains of the two ancestors. ASSIN MANSO is 36 miles from Cape Coast. On any ordinary day, ASSIN MANSO appears deserted, although it has a population of about 4,000. This is because the people, who are mostly farmers, spend their time on their farms, cultivating crops such as cocoa, palm nuts, oranges, plantain, and cocoyam. Why the reinterment at ASSIN MANSO? ASSIN MANSO was chosen for a very special reason. It was the last stopping point on the long and tortuous journey from upcountry to the coast. It was the point where the captives had their last formal bath in the Nyonkwosuo, or Slave River, before the final leg to the point of no return. Many of them died. Most of the burials took place in mass graves at this grove, which has been declared sacred. It is a taboo to farm or to destroy the vegetation at the grove. Running through the grove is the Nyonkwosuo River, where the enslaved had their last bath on their motherland. I wonder what story the river has to tell. I wonder what went through the minds of the millions of enslaved as they stared at the murmuring water. As they stood on the banks, I wonder why all this had to happen. God, I wonder. I keep wondering. For most Africans, especially those from the diaspora, this is a great moment, a never to be forgotten experience. To see, feel, smell, and wash in the very water where over 500 years ago their forebears had a last wash. It is a pilgrimage to discovering their roots and identity as Africans. John Carson and Crystal lie in state at ASSIN MANSO. We mourn Crystal, we mourn John Carson, we mourn the millions of ancestors who left our shores in chains to slavery and bondage. We honor their memory with a royal funeral, for royals they are. We drum and dance in their honor, dances which have been passed down from generation to generation, dances which we know will stir up feelings of nostalgia in the souls of the departed ancestors. Nana Akwaku Sapo, presidential advisor for chieftaincy affairs, himself a chief, graces the occasion with a complete retinue of courtiers. It is now the turn of the chief mourner, the paramount chief of the ASSIN traditional area, Nana Kwame Nchi XII. Between his lips is pepper. It is a symbol of emergency, of urgency, of life and death. This shows the seriousness of the extent to which the people of ASSIN consider this occasion.
Today,
Mr. Kojo Yanka officially hands over the remains to Nana Kwame Nchi XII.
Of Carson and Crystal to ASSIN MANSO
for the official interment to be pronounced.
Let us be aware that the second phase of our emancipation struggle is to free ourselves from mental slavery. We have redeemed our physical bodies from human flesh, chattel property, and our land of colonial political rule, but we have not claimed or reclaimed our African mind. We must be quickened out of the graves of our minds. Our minds must be replanted into the soul and destiny of our African selves, without permission or apology. The ancestors finally have an eternal resting place. The circle at last is complete, never to be broken again. Africans and all people of African descent have a duty to see to it. Never again should we allow ourselves to be dominated, oppressed, or fooled into fighting one another.
I feel that because of this day, many more black African people around the world will look at Ghana and not only think of coming back to live, but to invest in Africa.
So on the occasion of the first Emancipation Day celebration on the African continent, we fraternize, we reflect, we rededicate ourselves to the ideals of the fathers of Pan-Africanism. The homecoming of the remains of the two African ancestors should serve to unite Africans on the continent with Africans in the diaspora. Together, we can transform our continent from one of poverty to one of wealth and power. Africans may be poor, but Mother Africa is rich. Africa still abounds in vast natural resources. Across the ocean, a sizable amount of hard cash is being turned over annually by blacks in the diaspora. In the US alone, the black population has control of over some $500 billion US. Much of that money, and money from other diasporan strongholds, if attracted to the shores of the continent for investment into the abundant natural resources and budding industries, could set the continent to realizing the next and crucial stage of emancipation, economic emancipation. Economic emancipation, no doubt, is as important as emancipation from slavery, which we are celebrating today. Ghana has symbolically opened the door of no return to all Africans in the diaspora. This is an open invitation to all to return to the motherland, for all to feel at home, for all to join hands and together build one strong African continent.
Well,